Hello, this is Mike Kent. I'm a professor of computer information technology at San Jacinto College on the Central Campus. I've got an example program here I've written in C Sharp to demonstrate some single dimensional array activities, common code that you would do for C++. I've changed it up and done it as a Windows program so you can see a modern program running as opposed to using C in and C out, but still we're working with a one-dimensional array. So let me just show you what the program does. I'm going to hit start to run it, and I've got a load array button that just puts some values into the array. Input array pops up a window and lets me type in the values. Total array will show me the contents of the array in this list box. Also calculates the average, finds the minimum value in the array and the maximum, and then I have a search button to look for a value in the array. So right now, so I don't have to type something in from the keyboard, I'm going to hit load array, and then I'll hit total array. So the values it loaded into the array are right here. In the array averages, at subscript 0, it put 0.299. At subscript 1, 157. Subscript 2, 242, etc., 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 etc. And at subscript 7, which is the last entry in this array, 0.19. So this array is size 8. It goes 0 to 7. There is no 8th element. So the total array uses a for loop to add up the contents of the array and then divide by 8 to get the average. As it goes through the array, it looks for the smallest value and it displays it in this label, and it also looks for the largest value and displays it in this label. The search button, I can type in a value like 0.19, and it will search through the array to see if it finds a match, and it did. It found it right here at subscript 8 and highlighted that in the list box. If I was to put in like 0.333, do a search, it found it right there. If I put a value in that's not in there, it will say not found. So I want to dive into the code now and show you the code. So I'm going to stop the program and let's just look at load array. So I have an array called averages, and it goes size 8, so it goes 0 to 7. Now, we're getting into a little bit of the dialect of C# versus C++. In C++, I would just say float averages and give it the size that I want. Oops, there we are, got too much. I want it to be size 8 and not hit a semicolon, and that would create it. But that's not how you create an array in C#. In C# we have to say we want a float array called averages, and then we have to actually create that object. We have to say new. We have to the technical term would be instantiate, but we don't care about that. I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, that's my array, and you can see that my array is of size 8. I used a constant to set the size of the array, and I'm going to use this constant when I step through the array with a for loop. So if I go back to load values, remember the array is size 8, so it has 0 through 7. And I'm just putting values into each subscript of the array, loading it up. Now this is another C# thing. In C++ we could just do that. But in C#, if you type a number in like this, it says, oh, that's a double floating point, and you're trying to put a double floating point into a float, and it doesn't like that. So I have to, when I write that number, I have to put an F on the end of it so it knows it's a float number instead of a double. So that's two differences you'd see, but this loads up the array. Now, if I was to look at input array, and this is from the keyboard, I'm going to have a for loop, and instead of doing a cin, I'm going to use an input box which pops up a message and says, please enter a batting average. Then I'm going to take the batting average they typed in as a string, turn it into a single floating point, and put it into the array. So the first time through the for loop, loop index starts out at 0, so I'm putting it into averages of 0. I'm putting it into the first subscript of the array averages. And as long as we're array size minus 1, now why do we need to be array size minus 1? We got to be less than or equal to array size minus 1. That's because the subscripts, if it's size 8, the subscripts go 0 to 7. So I can never put anything into subscript 8. It does not exist. So remember how a for loop works. When it gets to the bottom of the loop, it fires off this piece of code right here and adds 1 to loop index. So the second time through the loop, it's going to put it in averages of 1. And then loop index is going to become 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I can demonstrate this. I'll run the program, and hopefully I won't make a mistake in my typing. But I'm going to say input array. So my first input is going to be 0.11. It pops up again, asks me for another input, 0.22, 0.33. Oh, it looks like I made a typo. I did. And I'm not handling typos in this program. But I'll just do it again. Let's do input array. First input, 0.11. Second input, 0.22. Third input into subscript 2, 0.33, 0.44, 0.55, 0.66, 0.77. And this should be the last one, 0.88. So an exit loop. Now if I hit total array, you can see my inputs. At subscript 0, it put 0.11. Subscript 1, it put 0.22. Subscript 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The last subscript, it put 0.88. So the last thing I want to do here is I want to run through this code for total array. I want to talk about it first, and then I'm going to put a breakpoint so we can actually single step through the code and watch it run one line at a time. I'm going to hit my stop button up here, and if we go to total array, this is the most complex. So I've got to create some variables. I'm creating a double floating point to hold my batting average, a variable to hold my minimum value, a variable to hold my maximum value. I got to have my total, and then I've got to have a loop control variable, which is an integer. This is going to be used with a for loop. So to simplify things a little bit, the first thing I'm going to do is assume that the smallest value in the array is at subscript 0, averages sub 0. I'm also going to assume that the maximum is at averages sub 0 until approved otherwise. Then I'm going to start my total out with averages sub 0. So now, instead of starting at 0 on my loop index, I'm going to start at 1, but I'm still going to go to array size minus 1. Array size is 8, so I'm going to go to 7. So I am going to put a breakpoint right here on line 68. So when I run my program, I'm just going to load my array, and then I'm going to say total array, and you can see how it paused right here. So loop index, right now my minimum value is 0.299, 0.298. My total is 0.298, and I can step through my code right up here by saying step over. So I'm going to say step over. It runs one line of code, step over, and as it steps into my code, we can see what's happening. Now I got to be careful right now that I don't hit F10 for step over. You can do that. If I hit F10, that tells my screen recording program that I'm done. So this is like the second or third time I've recorded this video because I've made a couple mistakes or misspoke early on, and then I got about this far into it and I hit F10, meaning to step into my next line of code, and it quit recording. So that was a little annoying. But, you know, make the video again. It's not a real long video. So now, the first time through the loop, you can see loop index is 1. Averages of loop index 1 is going to be, if I come down here to my watch window and open it up, you can see at 0 we have 0.299. At subscript 1 we have 157. So 157 is going to be smaller than 299. So this is going to be true, and that is going to become the new minimum. Then it's going to check and see if we have a new maximum, which we don't. And then it's going to add this value right here. This value, 157, is going to get added to total and become the new total. Now it hits the bottom of the loop. When it hits the bottom of the loop, loop index is going to go from 1 to 2. So now you see loop index has a value. As soon as it does this, loop index has a value of 2 now. So now we're looking at the next element in the array. We're looking at averages sub 2. We're looking at 242. So it says, is 242 smaller than 157? That's going to be false. So let's get it down in there. It's going to skip over that. But is 242 larger than? No, it's not the maximum either. So 242 is not larger than 299. Then we're going to add that to the total, so my total is getting larger. And we're going to keep going around the loop until loop index gets to 7. So let's see where we're at right now. Loop index is now 4. I'm going to go around again. Now loop index is going to be a value of 5. So we're going to be looking at element number 5, which is 333. That's the largest value in the array, so this should be the new maximum. It's not going to be the minimum because 333 is not smaller than 157. So that's going to be false. It's going to do the second if statement. It says, is 333 larger than 299? That's going to be true, so that becomes the new maximum. Then we're still going to add it to the total. So now we're up to loop index 6. We're almost done with the loop. This is my last pass through the loop because loop index is now up to a value of 7. So we're looking at 0.19 right now. That's where we are. That's averages of 7 is 0.19. That's the value that's stored in it. That is not smaller than the minimum. That is not larger than the maximum, but we add it to the total. Now, we're going to get out of the loop. We've run the loop 8 times. We're going to calculate the batting average, which is going to be my grand total divided by 8. I'm going to clear my list box out. This is beyond the scope of this class, but this is how you clear out a list box. The list box is called list averages, items.clear. And then I'm going to loop from 0 to 7, and I'm going to do items.add. I'm going to take subscript 0 from the array. I'm going to take 299, add it to the list box. That's the first pass. Now we're on loop index 1. It's going to add 157 to the list box, and it's just going to keep running until it displays everything in the list box. It's going to loop 8 times. Then it's going to drop out of the for loop. It's going to display the minimum, which is 157, to the label. It's going to display the maximum to label max on the screen. And then it's going to display the batting average to label average on the screen. So there we are. Now, if I do a search, and just so we don't have to step through the loop too many times, I'll go I'm going to search for 157. Okay? Search. So it comes into button search. Ooh, I almost hit F10. That would have been bad. Sets my found flag to false. It says, if there's nothing in the list box, it says, please use the total button first. There is, so we're okay. We're going to unselect everything in the list box, and you do that by setting the selected index property to -1. Then we're going to go get the input value from the text box. So we're going to be searching for 157. We're going to loop from the beginning of the array, subscript 0, to subscript 7, 0 to 7. First time through the loop, it's going to say if the search value of 157 is in subscript 0. Well, what's in subscript 0? 299. They are not going to be equal. That's going to be a false statement, so it's not going to do what's in the loop. Then it's going to increment the loop index is now 1, and it's going to look at the next value in the array. So it's going to say if the search value of 157 is equal to what's in subscript 1. You see we got a value of 1 here. That's going to be true. So what we're going to do here is set our search flag to true, saying we found it. And then just to give the users a visual, I'm going to select that item in the list box. I'm going to change the selected list index to 1 so the user can see which one was found. Now, this loop is not optimized. It will search through all 8 members even though it's already found it. But once it gets out of the loop, if the flag is true, it's going to pop up a message box saying, I found it, else not found. So since it found it, pops up our message box saying found it, and we can see where it found it. It found it right here at this item. So this little program just shows you arrays in action, a single dimensional array, and some of the common tasks we do. We can just bomb some values into an array, hard code them in. There's other ways to do this. We can do an input loop where we go through a loop for each item in the array, and we pop up a box asking the user to type into a number. We put the first number into loop index 0, the next number in loop index 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We go all the way to the size of the array minus 1. So all throughout my program, I'm using this constant, and I can only go to item number 7. So I always have to say minus 1. Now technically, I could have said less than array size. That would have gone 0 to 7 because since I said less than instead of less than or equal to. So there's more than one way to skin a cat. Now, this does a little bit of a tricky technique to search through the array to get to look for the maximum and the minimums by starting out already taking care of item number 0. This is kind of priming the pump, and then we can start our loop index at 1 instead of 0. And then we can look to see if we find the average, find the minimum. If so, we make that the minimum. Look to see if this element in the array is greater than the maximum. It becomes the new maximum. And then add it to accumulate our total. Now, once we're out of the loop, you don't do this in the loop. Once you're out of the loop, you take your total and divide it by array size. So that's this program. Just a quick example of a Windows program that's working with a single dimensional array. Thanks.